I'm not going to ask you to make an introduction because I do have a little bit of understanding, but let me start with yourself, Beerud. Now, not many people would know, but Beerud runs a very successful unicorn. He's raised, I think, about $300 million, $350 million in the last few months.
Yeah, well, a couple of years ago, but yes.
Okay, a couple of years ago. So he's sitting on serious valuations and serious money. Beerud, if I were to ask you, what are you doing with the money? Are you investing in your existing business? Are you creating a new line of business? And if it's a new line of business and you're buying companies as well, are you concerned about regulation? And what is it that you're concerned about?
Sure. So just to provide some context in case people don't know, so Gupshup, the word itself means chit-chat. And as the name implies, we do conversational engagement, essentially helping businesses and enterprises build chatbots to engage with their customers. So we have 45,000 customers. We do 10 billion messages a month, very high scale. So yes, we raised about 350, but half of it sort of was just a secondary transaction as it went to old investors. But the other half came into the company. And then over the last couple of years, we did a bunch of things. We, of course, invested in growing our business organically. We've acquired about 5 companies, which sort of filled out the product stack. As we look at, we think conversational engagement, it's like the new internet in the emerging markets, right? In mobile-first, messaging-centric ecosystems. Just like in China, WeChat is sort of the platform for the internet. In other emerging markets, it's going to be WhatsApp-like, right? So we think every business, every brand is going to need to do this to engage their customers, and we are enabling it. So that's a very ambitious, that's a huge opportunity. That's a very ambitious goal. And therefore, yeah, we're investing in product and so on. And then coming to sort of policy and navigating those issues, I mean, you just watch carefully. Look, as entrepreneurs, you tend to flow like water around regulators, right? You can't control regulatory policy. It's sort of it's a complex set of processes and so on. You clearly don't want to run afoul of it. You comply where you can. You stay away from it entirely if possible, right? Because then you maintain your flexibility to execute rapidly and so on. But AI and conversational AI in particular, of course, there'll be elements of regulation, data privacy, data jurisdiction, and so on. So all of these things we build into our products and so on. So you try to stay, a couple of steps ahead of what's coming. Where possible, you try to anticipate or guess, because ultimately, I think regulators need to support growth and innovation. And I think in all of this, you just have to make sure that as an entrepreneur, you're implementing good intent, meaning your products reflect good intent. Because we don't want to be a fly-by-night company either, right? The only way we build a successful, sustainable business is if we add value to customers and you don't abuse their trust and certain policies and things. So you just try to do the right thing where possible, and then on the margins where new regulations come up, you adjust and adapt quickly.
Got it. Well, that's one point of view where Beerud is saying that you could potentially anticipate regulations and either stay away from it or operate within that framework. I'm going to ask JS, and JS, you're based in Korea, and now you are expanding your credit scoring models, which were there in Korea, and bringing them into Indonesia, and operating and finding models, developing models to fund purchases of EVs. Is that correct? Yeah. And you told me the other day that you've actually benefited from policies that are enabling you to be able to do better with you. So why don't you share how policy making actually is helping for you to expand with your algorithms or even raise more capital?
Okay, so let me a little bit back to my previous experience as a policymaker. I was as a chief of staff of the financial minister of Korea a few years back before I I started this company. And then also the capital provider, I was just invested in wireless charging technology and sold it to the Qualcomm before. And then based on that, while I work at the Citibank, I was in charge of liquidating the Asian businesses. So at that time, that the AI can automate this kind of a banking industries. That is the starting of this company. So we have started technologies providing the banking industries. So at this moment, not only the credit score, we are covering around the 20% of the fraud detection systems in the payment side in Korea. Around 500 billion trillion is quite a large number of transactions are done by that. Based on this technology, so we are expanding into where that AI technologies can be applicable under the name of the finance industry. So we are looking at the one industry that is fastly evolving globally, which is electrical vehicle, the market. For example, the 120 years of auto industries is transforming into the electrical vehicle in a very short period of time. So all the policymakers are pushing forward to that direction. So that is the one direction. And the one kind of real economy is changing into the new system, the new financial system will adopt to it. So if you look at the electrical vehicle, this is very new industries in terms of everything. So battery, and then all these numbers are stored in digitally. So this is a perfect environment where the AI can be applicable and in real time. So, and then on the other hand, this kind of new economy is emerging. The finance industry is a little bit behind the providing capital in that direction. So we are in the middleman providing the holistic technological platform to linking the financial institutions on one side, and the other side is the electric vehicle ecosystem, including the ride-hailing companies and logistic companies and manufacturing companies, and then also drivers working in that direction. So all this ecosystem is our clients. So. And then there's a two sides of a policy directions. One side is the pushing forward. For example, there's a bunch of subsidies pouring into charging stations and battery swapping stations, manufacturing of the electric vehicle, and then there is a number of bikes you need to change in this year. And then when the new drivers comes into that ecosystem, you need to buy the electrical vehicle. From the beginning, that is one direction that we are benefited from. And the other side is that the data privacy is a little bit behind. It's not seeing that kind of a strong policy makings in this direction. So at this moment, we're benefiting in that direction. So that is helping our businesses for the time being.
So it's interesting that as an innovator, you could go into multiple industries. You're saying that electrical vehicles is an area where policymaking is likely to be supportive in general, and hence it makes possibly a better case to go into an industry where you think there will be policy support as opposed to policy risk. Yeah. Aki, if I were to ask you, you've successfully exited from your previous company, which you co-founded, which is a robo-advisory business, and now you're actively an investor, and you're looking to potentially even be a founder yourself. I don't know. But you're exploring AI intimately and deeply. And what is it that are your thoughts right now? That is it an area where you should actively invest in? Or is it something that you should wait for regulations to be a little bit more clear for a particular sector and then go ahead? Or is there a third option there?
Okay. Yeah, how much time do we have? Well, I think some of the other speakers have touched on these topics earlier today. You know, I think I've had the luxury of spending the last 6 months mostly thinking about these issues from the perspective of, I guess, investor now, but also, you know, potential founder, advisor, consultant, all of the above. And I think what really troubles me is that, like, I had a whole set of assumptions around this topic that were valid until last week, and I think that's a big problem. I think it's quite rare that you would have sort of innovators or founders thinking that things are moving too fast, but I genuinely think things are moving too fast. One word we haven't talked about yet today, AGI, sort of like the existential risks. We've talked about a lot of sort of, I would say, near-term, obvious kind of like financial risks, but we haven't talked about like the big risk at hand. And from my perspective, we could change the world with GPT-4. I don't really think there's a need at this point for GPT-5 or something, let's say, far beyond that. So I think, to your choice at the beginning, like, should we sort of slow down? Should we accelerate regulation? I think the choice could be articulated much more kind of boldly, which is you can choose between dumb or dangerous AI. That's it. So which do you want? Do you want to roll the dice on danger, or do you just accept that, like, we could, as I said, we could already change the world with the kind of dumb AI because it's plenty intelligent already. There's so many use cases we could already do. But I think from my perspective as an investor, as I said, like, my thoughts changed a lot since the last week. I think I'm still collecting my new thoughts because my thesis previously was that, kind of backing what some of the other people said previously already, is that I think there's a lot of opportunity kind of working with the incumbents, whether it's in fintech or other industries. And my understanding is that, or thinking is that each company, large company enterprises, would have roughly 100 use cases for generative AI all across the business, from customer facing to internal process to products, R&D, you name it. But now my thinking has been updated in terms of this new GPT's paradigm, the new Assistants API, the upcoming GPT store from OpenAI. My sense is like, well, how many of those 100 use cases could be done with, say, a business analyst and 1 hour time from a developer? Is it 10 of the 100 or is it 90? That changes things quite a lot, and I'm still undecided whether it is 10 or 90 or 50. So that's something I'm thinking about actively. But to be honest, to sort of summarize, Marc Andreessen said in 2011, I believe, that software is eating the world. But now I think the new statement is OpenAI is eating the world. This is kind of a one-man show right now. They have a monopoly that I think Peter Thiel would be quite jealous of, in that they are really setting the tone. They are the ones pushing the boundaries. They're building a closed ecosystem. It's not open source. And so I think we really should ask ourselves, is that something that we want to enable? Or is that a place where we should regulate now, and pretty heavy-handed, in my view?
Okay. So if I just continue on that for a little bit, which is from, as an investor, which is what you are now, how do you assess the risk in a particular investee company which comes from the policy side, if it is in the AI domain?
Yeah, I guess you have to worry, you're between a rock and a hard place, the rock being OpenAI and the hard place being policy. Right now, in terms of investing, I'm more worried about OpenAI. They used to say that riches are in niches. I think you have to dig pretty hard for those niches right now, for the aforementioned reasons. So I think as it relates to policy, I think it's more like, as said previously, it's kind of like, don't do something that is obviously going to be regulated first. I would also say probably, if I could choose, I would probably primarily focus on use cases outside of regulated industries, say finance, pharmaceuticals, medicine, because I think it's more likely you will see kind of dramatic, potentially reversals or changes there. Whereas if you're operating in more sort of softer markets, you may have a smoother ride. I think in terms of the OpenAI challenge, that's super tricky still. Infrastructure, GPUs, are these really games most startups can play in? As of last week, a lot of startups were using companies like Pinecone and LangChain, and now they're not, because OpenAI just pulled in the reins and said, well, I'll just do that as part of my stack, so now you don't need these guys anymore. So, those were two kind of like household names until last week that like most companies would use, and now that's not relevant. So I think it's just hard to say where the opportunities are. You're not going to challenge NVIDIA, you're not going to challenge OpenAI, probably shouldn't build your own foundation models. So I'm going to go, if I had to choose something, in the applications. But even there, as I said, I'm still kind of like updating my position because I don't think there's any real safe place.
Got it. Beerud, you come from the Valley. What's the conversation like right now around AI policymaking? Do they really care about what policymaking will do, or say, let's go and build what we have to build and we'd worry about policymaking when we come to it?
Oh, I think by and large, it's almost exactly the opposite of, I think, what he mentioned. So I'll take the other point of view, but I think we are so early in this AI thing where, the opportunities are endless. If you can have an AI doctor that can take care of people, if you can have AI tutor that can educate people, it would be a criminal waste of opportunity as a society to kind of scotch it or nip it too early. And there's like innumerable unseen opportunities that we have barely even begun to scratch the surface. And all for this boogeyman of, some existential threat that we haven't even gotten to. And there's still so many cards that we as a society can play, both as entrepreneurs as well as regulators and so on, right? So I think, if anything, I think, the flip side of too much regulation is, you have regulatory capture, right? Paradoxically, the one company that might benefit the most from regulation might be OpenAI itself, right? So if you're trying to regulate or, sort of have more competition, it might often serve the exact opposite purpose, because anytime there's a regulation, it sort of imposes a cost on startups and businesses, and the larger companies always tend to benefit and solidify, the ecosystem or the landscape as exists, as opposed to the disruptors. But I think there are lots of chip companies being born that are taking on NVIDIA. There's lots of open source models that are coming up, and a lot of energy around that in the Valley, for sure. I personally know a lot of people, let alone, what you read and so on. So, and then applications, we've just barely begun. Like in our case, we take conversational AI to enterprises, and enterprises are just about starting to absorb all of these things, because they have to understand it, they have to fine tune, they have to, when an AI speaks on behalf of a brand, then they have to be very careful. So the testing and all of that takes a lot of time. So, there's like still quite a few years of innovation yet to play out. And sure, I think, this debate is helpful and useful, and we should keep our eyes on it, and keep continuing to debate it. But, this could be the same Mark Andreessen that you're talking about. His latest article is AI is going to save the world, right? It's going to be a massive boost in productivity that perhaps, will certainly create, new jobs, certainly, this GDP growth and abundance economy. We can go on, but I think the upside is so huge that, I think to sort of try and scotch it this early when we don't, I think, so we just have to be careful. Maybe on the regulatory side, I'll say the following, right? If you follow the conversation from earlier today, there's a lot of uncertainty around, okay, we shouldn't do it too early, we shouldn't do it too late, you shouldn't be too light, you shouldn't be too heavy. It's sort of, there's just so much uncertainty, right? That Goldilocks zone, if you will, just right, kind of at right moment in time and the right magnitude of policy and so on. I think that there's no such magical policy that I think will come up. I think if anything, I might suggest that regulators maybe look at it as from a risk management standpoint. Like, let's take a different framework. I'm an entrepreneur. I've never been a policymaker, so take it with a grain of salt. But if I was a policymaker, I would take the same entrepreneurial approach that we take in business, which is you do A/B testing, right? You do feature flagging, meaning you try something here, you try something else there. You do gradual rollouts, alpha, beta releases, and so on. And these things have happened, variations of this. Like, there were special economic zones because you weren't sure whether you should liberalize tariffs or not. So, okay, let's just try it in this region, we'll try it in that city, and if it works, we'll expand it, right? Perhaps when there's so much uncertainty, a little bit of A/B testing or experimenting can't hurt, and I think it'll just have to, take a slightly different approach to this, and we'll figure it out, right? We are sort of, we still have plenty of controls, and we are as we work through this. So to say that it's magically going to happen and we have no cards to left to play, I think would be too draconian and too early kind of thing. Yeah.
Understood. I used to work for ING's asset management business at a point in time, and this was back in India, and we were going to introduce quantitative style of investing for the first time to the market, to the industry. And we went to the regulator explaining we were going to do this, and this is going to be a model that's going to decide whether to buy, hold, or sell a particular security. And the regulator was very worried, how is this going to work? And so educating the policymaker, the regulator, was an essential part of doing new things. And so, JS, in Korea, is there a policymaker view which is open to understanding from industry how to, when I say industry, I mean the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the founders, on what do they need from the policymaker? Is there a conversation of that nature that's in play?
Yeah, that kind of conversation has just started. In the previous sessions, there's a chart. It's the bottom line, X line is a guideline, and then the Y line is more like a legislative actions. So Korea is very bottom in the middle. So in that sense, it's, there's some kind of discussions initiated, but not in a serious way. So that is the current status. From the, but in the overall, as an entrepreneur's stages point of view, like we cannot build the all entire foundational model ourselves. In that sense, we can leverage that kind of new emerging technologies in our businesses. That is our also the like a tailwind that we can utilize. So how we can utilize it? So my wish is that if the government or some kind of guideline can be transparent, and then some kind of guidance can be provided in the like stakeholders' point of view, then we are very easy to adopt this kind of new technologies to our existing businesses, so that we can leverage. So like that is the current status.
Okay, and is it any different in a different industry, which is electric vehicles, in a different market, which is Indonesia? Are you seeing conversations as an entrepreneur which are different in a different industry? I know we're all talking financial services, but what I'm hoping to learn or understand is there something that the financial services industry can learn from another industry, which is sunrise, which is, say, electric vehicles?
Mm-hmm. Right, so we are targeting as a company, as a whole, we have two businesses. One is the e-commerce, which is very domestic in Korea market, where the whole data is coming out to our platform, and then we processing AI, we deliver to the financial institutions. That is one business line that we are doing in Korea. And a global scale, so we are targeting, the reason why we are targeting the electric vehicle is a product itself is like standard. Wherever you go, is the same. The only different thing is that the government has a lot of money to do that. For example, in the United States, we're talking to the trucking business in the United States. They have a huge size of subsidy, right? So that is government money. So they have where the country has a lot of money they can providing in that direction. It's a more strong way. And Indonesia has one of the nickel. The largest nickel resources countries, then they want to build like a vertical integrations, not only the resources, battery and manufacturing, and then some service platforms. They want to build a holistic, the vertical alliance in their own countries. But in the Vietnam, want to follow that directions, but so not much money to do that kind of policies. And then also European countries, they have a strong it's a budget. They set up a huge budget to the pushing forward that direction. So, if you look at the vehicle itself, it's a globally identical. So we just want to tie the wave, that kind of a global standard product, and the finance itself is also like a globally standardized. Only the language is different, but it's the finance side. How can he lend the money? How can he provide insurance in that ecosystem? the measuring the risks, right? So measuring the risks need a lot of data. For example, like we are like collecting all the related information from the electrical vehicle ecosystem. For example, like a payment and logistic and real-time GPSs. How many chargings are like a charge in the battery level, so battery status. All these informations are captured by us. And then still, the banks are not ready to understand this kind of raw information. So we are the mediator and the, like a translator using the AI. That is the role of AI. And that is at this moment. So we are helping, backed by the government side.
Okay. Aki, if as an innovator you had one ask of policymakers on the AI domain, what would that be? And I'm going to ask everyone the same thing, so you can keep your answers ready.
Yeah, I mean, you made reference to the EU AI Act, and that's been my kind of like one hope is that the EU could be the adult in the room. Nobody likes to accept cookies when you go on websites, but that is effectively given to us by GDPR. And you could say, like, whilst it hasn't prevented the sort of harms of social media, you could also imagine things could be a lot worse without GDPR. So there's definitely been an effect. And so, can we have something equivalent for AI? I was really worried a couple of days ago when I saw an article saying that in the latest working sessions, France and Germany are now potentially trying to carve out or like blocking the regulation of foundation models. Why? Because they happen to have really well-funded startups building foundation models. And so there is this regulatory capture risk, I feel, and I agree in the sense that like, if it's a regulation that it's sort of like from OpenAI's perspective pointing down to the world, that's not really helping. I think I actually sort of agree with the US executive order, which is really more focused on sort of regulating the upper end, which is like, well, if you're doing sort of the equivalent of like nuclear weapons grade AI, then you should be regulated. Then we need to understand your safety protocols. I do agree actually with that approach. But I think my one ask is that if we can't get safe AI or safe AGI, then don't let basically these innovators, us, push the boundaries. Like again, I think we can, if we stop here, GPT-4 is plenty for us to innovate, rewrite the internet, improve efficiencies. There's going to be so many benefits from GPT-4. Do we really need to be poking the ice as we're walking on the ice? So I'm really in favor of quite strong regulation as it relates to where we go next. I don't think right now what we're doing is that dangerous. So I think when I think of regulation, it's more forward-looking, not sort of like changing what's being done right now. Because again, I think even though GPT-4 is like super capable, it's not super risky. It's more that like, well, why go further?
Got it. Beerud, what would your one ask be from policymakers around AI?
I think, just building on the point I was talking earlier about just a better risk management framework, right? And thinking of it as a co-development, right? You're co-developing regulatory policies along with entrepreneurs. I mean, let's start with the fact that entrepreneurs themselves, all of us, we are building and we don't know how deep this rabbit hole goes, right? We're figuring out what the capabilities are, where it works, where it doesn't. And neural networks, even though LLMs have miraculous results, it's not, the explainability is still limited. I mean, these are just, magic matrices that when you multiply them, give you some
Black
probabilities,
boxes, yeah.
right? So we don't know what it works for, how it works. There's so much to be figured out. So if the entrepreneurs don't know, policymakers know even less because they're trying to keep up and catch up. So I think this is, way too early to say exactly what the regulation should be, right? So but what we can say is, okay, what should the process be to figure out this regulation and co-evolve it and fine-tune it as we go along? And the answer for that is, on the one hand, we have these enormous potential benefits and upside opportunities, and that can be harnessed for the greater good of society. So let's let it ride, let's keep riding that as a society, and we want to support that. And then every step we go, we uncover, challenges or sort of not so good directions that you want to stop. And I think there will be opportunities, multiple opportunities along the way to keep nudging research and development in the right direction and away from the wrong direction. Even if you assume that some horrible, crazy monster AI is going to happen, the worst thing you could actually do is saying, okay, let's declare the stop, because by definition, the good parties willing to be regulated will comply, which means the ones that won't are the ones that get ahead, because by definition, they're not going to comply. And there's no way to enforce this sort of on a global scale. So I think it might paradoxically lead to the exact opposite of the outcomes that one might want to wish. In general, you want whatever your definition of good is, but good AI with good people and more good AI, and so long as the responsible people have stronger resources and weapons and technology, so to speak, that's the only defense against the irresponsible folks getting it and having it, right? So stopping would be the exact opposite thing to do, right? So I think the answer is, okay, let's, a lot of it is just speculation yet. I think, it's a lot of extrapolation from, and a lot of hypothetical stuff yet. There's a lot of cards to be played out on the R&D side, and then on the policy side as well. So I think it just has to be a process of co-development. I think the executive order is perhaps a starting point. But even that, right, it lays out some guidelines, but it could again go in one of two directions. If it leads to regulatory capture by a few companies, that can again be a problem. On the other hand, because the fleshing out of details is yet to be done. I think these are sort of very high-level markers, guidelines, if you will, rather than specific legislation, right? So I think this debate has to be joined from both sides, from the entrepreneur side as well as policymakers, and we have to, figure it out. Yeah.
Got it. JS, what would your one ask be from financial regulators as it pertains to AI?
Yeah, right. So I just want to propose that we need to segregate the mission-critical AI and the non-mission critical AI. For example, like if you back to the AI is a newborn baby. So we have observed for the last 10 years that when the AI sees it, is everybody wow, and images, and hear it wow, and then slowly speaks wow. And then now the baby suddenly speaks as fluent languages. That's why we are surprising. And then what's the next step? So the baby will learn very specific topics, mathematics and the science and the English literature, something like that. So this kind of AI technologies will be evolved into very specific industry directions. So, and then some kind of a military and the finance and medical. This kind of industry is very mission critical industries, right? This is very dangerous if AI can be misused. In that area, that's more strong and more transparent policies, I think, should be imposed in that direction. But the other area, I don't know where the rest of them. So the technology need to be developed in that direction. So in one side, more strong, and then more the other side, and a more like loose policy, the guidelines will be. That is an ask that I can ask for the policymakers.
Okay. There's a very good story from Yuval Harari where he talks about how nuclear weapons have actually made the world safer as opposed to more dangerous. Previously, to your point, Beerud, countries would spend somewhere between 80 to 90% on just defense. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about as recent as up to 200 years ago. And only in the last 100 years or so, the actual allocation towards education, health, infrastructure has increased because nuclear weapons came in and there was protection available, and hence you could reallocate those resources to other areas. So clearly there is that upside possible if handled correctly.
No, I mean, I think about it, right? If we get into an abundance world, the scarcity goes away, which is what leads to wars and what people fight over, right? If everybody could just have enough and you're not fighting for, I don't know, water or land which are currently scarce, I think a lot of the issues would not exist. So frankly, I mean, if you imagine if somebody could have some magical power that drives massive productivity growth, massive abundance, lowers price, increases cost, quality of life, and it's an abundance economy. I think the bar for going to wars and conflict is just a lot higher, because what are you going to war over, right? When a lot of these things become available and so on. So I think I'm more on the side of optimism, cautious optimism, in terms of, I think the opportunity, the possibilities are just insanely powerful and good, and I think it would be. I think maybe a lot of us elites can sit in these rooms and talk about it, but there's like billions of people out there that are still trying to catch up to the last 100 years of evolution and civilization that we've developed. And why would you deprive them of just a doctor or resources or just basic living and even sustenance living and so on. So I think there's there's so many important critical world problems.
So the message really is that innovators should continue to look at areas where there is likely to be support from government, policymakers, for example, health, for example, climate and other things. Those are tailwinds that are positive. There are risks for sure, and Aki, you're still evaluating. You're saying every week there is some new thing that comes in, and my old hypothesis or what I thought was an informed view has evolved and changed. So yes, we will continue to keep the dialogue on. So I'd like to thank the panel for being with us here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.